everybody. Great to be together back in Ann Arbor Church. I'm pumped. Got a little extra sleep this morning, which doesn't always happen with a 3-month-old. Pumped about that. My clicker is, of course, not quote. Yes. All right, so before we start, I wanted to give a heads up on just some of the upcoming things. We'll do more of this at the end, but last Wednesday, for those who were able to come, we talked about some of the things we'd be talking about this year. Some of the, just kind of the first quarter, really, of the year. What are we going to be preaching on? And one of those things, we're going to open up with a study on pride and humility. The church said, yay. That was great. Why that? Why not? And also, it's always relevant, right? Like, you're talking about pride. You can almost detect in every sin you commit. And humility, you can almost detect in every virtue you exhibit. And so, moving down to the roots of our character is the idea as we start the new year. Before we do, I just want to introduce Adam Crenshaw. If you just give a quick stand up and a wave. I don't know if you know any cool dance moves. You don't have to do. And you're clapping and you don't know who he is. That's because you're good-hearted. He could be a crazy person, but I don't think he is. He's a disciple from Oregon, Medford, Oregon. And he's been a disciple for 11 years. He's got a wife and 2 kids, 5 and 3. He's here for like 2 weeks on for work, and then he goes home and he's 2 weeks back. So if you see him, give him extra encouragement. And, bro, I'm just grateful you're here, man. I hope you can feel like we're family while you're here. I'm away from home. So, have any of you ever played racquetball before?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a very excited KJ. That's awesome. Racquetball is a sport that requires much skill. It's kind of a wild sport, actually. I might need you to help me out, Emily. Was that you or me?
I didn't know.
Awesome. Everyone will know, but I'm going to do that. I need you to finish it. You'll all know who's doing the work. Racquetball is a sport that requires skill. It's a crazy game, right? So there's 6 walls. You're in a cube. It's a little claustrophobic. You have to wear protective glasses if you're going to play it smart. And this ball is all over the place. It requires hand-eye coordination. It requires agility. It requires hand-foot coordination. It requires you processing quickly. The game that's not one that requires skill is Candyland. Have any of you ever played Candyland? Candyland requires no skill. You flip over the card, and just do what it tells you to do. So it's perfect for those of you that feel a lot of anxiety about failure. Amazingly, though it requires no skill, it is nothing like racquetball. Candyland has caused so many tears in the Eastman home. It's not just my kids. No, it's just my kids, right? Like my kids just, like, they lose Candyland, and it's like it actually mattered, you know? It said something about their skill. Their hatred of losing just causes tears. And perhaps you can relate, maybe not to crying over Candyland, but do you know where my kids got their hatred of losing? Not from my wife. Can you imagine Christy getting really angry at you if she lost the game? You know, like, you'd be like, whoa, what, jeez, like, you'd be horrified. That's more me. Like, I love to win. And growing up, I had this hatred of losing, especially in the sports I played. And so the way it most manifested was in tennis. And my mom would like, I could only be so angry before my mom, like, put her foot down. It was like, I'm going to start, like, cutting your allowance. Which, like, I got an allowance, which is, like, a huge deal to me because I'm also really cheap. I hated losing money. That was her threat. My hatred of losing, you know what the root of that was? It's pride. I did not like to appear worse than I was. Or not as good as I perceived myself. I didn't like the thought of somebody else thinking I wasn't as good as I thought I was. My older sister, is one of the 5 most competent people I've met in my life. She's got this super high-powered job at Nordstrom, A's from the time she was like, you know, as soon as you can start getting grades till the end, like all A's. I remember the day she came back in high school with a B. And I remember it was like how sad I was when our dog died. Like, it was intense. And her anger was driven by her sense that she felt like in that moment, it was a mediocre representation of what she could have been. She hated that she appeared mediocre. She would call that pride, right? That's where that came from. I hate being mediocre. I can't believe I got the B. I was like, a B is pretty good. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I wasn't like an F student. It's A's and B's and occasional C, but I got a lot of B's. For me, maybe for you as well, or in academia or work, a disappointment with your results, often fueled by pride. You know, the idea that like I didn't perform to the standard I wanted to perform. Often the disappointment that fuels insecurity, when you go deep down, that's fueled by pride. My anxiety, fueled by my loss of control, fueled by pride. I'm telling you, pride will find itself at the root of almost every sin. Like you can make it work everywhere. And when you really learn to dig down, which is what we're going to do today, because today we're going to have a study on pride. And next week we'll have a study on humility. It'll be a little more cheery. But when you look at pride, you'll find it everywhere. And perhaps you've heard of a time, or perhaps you've been through this. If you've ever gone to buy a car or buy a new thing, I remember when Chris and I went to get our minivan, the Chrysler Pacifica, great car. I had never really seen those on the road before. Like if you asked me, what does a Pacifica look like? I'd be like, I'm not sure. And as soon as I went to test drive one, guess what I saw everywhere? Have you ever been through that before?
Yes.
We were like, they're everywhere. I'm seeing them more. You're actually not seeing them more. It's called frequency illusion. And this is the definition of it. After noticing something for the first time, there is a tendency to notice it more, leading someone to believe that it's occurring more often, but in reality, it is simply one's increased awareness that makes it feel like it's happening all the time. You know, when you start to understand what the fruit of your pride looks like, you start to see it everywhere. You start to have frequency illusion in your own life. And that's actually a healthy thing, but it can be challenging. The very first part of battling your pride is increasing your self-awareness and flipping this page. In Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, this is maybe one you're familiar with. Pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride is a virus. Viruses are one of the smallest forms of life, for all you neurobiologists. When we think of them, we think of sickness, right? Perhaps if you know any history, you think of Ebola, or maybe more recently, you think of COVID. Right? Fast-spreading, often dangerous, leads to widespread sickness, at times death. Right? The great strength of a virus, why they're so insidious, is their ability to rapidly grow, spread, and evolve. Our bodies battle back. We're going to talk about that next week because our body exhibits a very similar reaction to a virus as humility does to our pride.
Wow.
The virus's job is to stay ahead of the body's guardians, the white blood cells, by constantly evolving, growing, spreading, and increasing the infestation. If the virus can move faster and more subtly, the body can't keep up. Pride is the same way in your character. Sometimes it's so obvious what's going on. Wow, that person... Sometimes the white blood cells target the virus and it's fine. And sometimes it's so subtle, so insidious, evolving, shifting, morphing. It makes it hard to recognize that pride may be the cause of your troubles, of the fruit of your life even. So what is pride? Pride, I've defined this from, go ahead, Emily, you can switch it. From the words that come from pride, proud, and arrogant biblically. I've kind of extrapolated these out. Here are some of the definitions: to inflate, to puff up, to think of oneself better than others, overestimation of self, treating others with contempt. And the next one, which I think is the most powerful, says an insolent and empty assurance, which trusts in its own power and resources and despises divine law and human rights. Wow. Gotta like sit on that for a second. That's kind of intense. In 1943, there was a surprise attack launched on Pearl Harbor, an American naval base in the Pacific, that thrust the United States into the Second World War of the 20th century. And you've probably all heard of it. I'm sure you've all have some history on this, right? The plan was to cripple the U.S. Navy to the point that before they even entered the war, they would be out of the Pacific area. There's a better word for that than area, but I didn't write it down, obviously. The Japanese aircraft hit like a hammer, crippling the Pacific Fleet in a complete surprise attack. This is what we would call the opening salvo for the United States. The first punch thrown in the war for the U.S. Now, opening salvos happen in the Eastman home as well. It's not just the world wars. Here's a picture of my kids playing together well, because I've asked them to pose for a picture. So you'll see down below, have you guys ever seen those magnetic tiles before?
Yes.
So if you ever have kids, if you have kids now, and you have family that's always wanted to buy them a present, get them this one. Because I'm telling you, it has occupied our children for like 2 weeks straight. It has been magic. And so these tiles, they're in high demand right now. You know when a toy goes in really high demand over Christmas so you can't find them anywhere? Tickle Me Elmo used to be that way when I was younger. Tickle Me Elmo was a craze. So this is what the opening salvo looks like in the Eastman home. It goes something like this. The kids are playing with the tiles, and amongst it, if you look closely, if you have good eyes, you'll see down below Pokemon. This is Charizard, and this is Blastoise. You have to understand, this is not a joke in our home. Charizard and Blastoise occupy positions of great honor in the Eastman home. They're very into Pokemon now. And Blastoise is surprisingly the favorite. He's like the water cannon Pokemon. If you're like, I've never seen it, just stick with me, okay? And we'll talk about it a little while. He's the favorite. You can see how this might go down. Rowan's playing with Blastoise, having a blast. You're welcome. And you can see Kate start to stalk him like a tiger in the brush. Like she wants that toy. You can see her, she moves in, and Rowan can kind of like sense it. You know when someone's looking at you and you're like, what do you do? Like it feels almost heavy. And sometimes we're just watching, we're like, what's going to happen? And you can see Kate's like, I want that. That would be considered the opening salvo. That's the first punch thrown. Often followed up by a grab, perhaps. Maybe a stiff arm from Rowan. Maybe a whine. Maybe anger. It's the beginning of the fight, and it happens a lot. Satan threw one of these at the very beginning of humanity. His opening salvo. Turn to Genesis 3, and we're going to read our first verse here. Genesis 3, a very familiar text, one of the most familiar narratives in the Bible because it's about the beginning. And we see Satan's first punch, the first punch thrown. Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." Seems pretty clear. You will surely not die, the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and she ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it as well. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. And of course, the story goes on. They hide from God. The first shame enters into humanity, right? They hide from God. God walks through, and he says, "Where are you?" And they say, "We were afraid." "Why were you afraid?" "Because we were naked." "How did you know you were naked?" You know, he obviously knows. He just wants them to fess up. God determined at the very beginning of time what our moral compass should be. Good, evil, right and wrong. And he crafted them lovingly, and he made them exceedingly clear. You can have all this, but just not that. Right? Opportunity for free will comes into the picture. Then, of course, along comes the serpent. And what exactly does the serpent do? He attacks Adam and Eve's trust in God by stroking their ego. Do you see that? He undermines their belief that God's way is the best way, and he convinces them that maybe you know better. Are you sure that's what he said? Are you sure this isn't what he wants? Isn't this what you want? Wouldn't this be good? God's holding out on you. You see what he's doing is like he's not giving you what you deserve. He's attacking their pride. Because he knows at the very root, their lack of trust in their action came from pride. They knew better than God. And it was by manipulating their pride that Satan was able to generate mistrust between them and God and create the first separation. They wanted to be the determiners of what was right and wrong, to determine their own moral compass. So we have the Opening Salvo fight, right? Like the attack on Pearl Harbor, like Kate coming in hot for Blastoise. The serpent comes in. And what's helpful to us, this is an important metaphor even for us. The connection we can make is this. This is how we often, and humanity often interacts with sin. And let me tell you what I mean. We know right and wrong. We know the moral compass God has laid out, it's clear. And many times the real danger of sin is not simply the sin itself, the action, but it's that when you sin, we often justify in our minds that it's a good thing. Let me give you examples from the Bible. Think about Pharaoh. Pharaoh enslaved the Hebrews, the beginning of Exodus, for the sake of his kingdom and legacy. In his mind, in Pharaoh's mind, enslaving and brutally treating an entire people group was justified good behavior. Where does that come from? It comes from pride. And we'll talk about this more next week, but kind of the connection to any kind of modern day thing to go to the World War II example is Nazism was so dangerous because there's the elevation of one people group above another. That essentially, in a word, is just pride, right? That's the beginnings of it. That's what Pharaoh did. Consider Joseph's brothers. The story of Joseph in the end of Genesis. If you don't know the story, it's the hero in the story is a boy, a teenager, and his brothers hate him so much because of their envy, which comes from pride, that they beat him half to death and sell him into slavery, and then justify it and lie about it their whole lives, even though they knew it was wrong. This is what he deserves. It's wild, isn't it? Like to justify an action like that. Or what about Saul, who would become Paul? Goes from house to house in the name of God, putting Christians in prison, separating families, and even murdering some of them. All in the good. It's a good thing. It's crazy where we can get, isn't it? And of course, this happens with us on a smaller level, right? Our tendency to try to justify our wrongdoing when we sin, to try and convince ourselves that it's not that bad. At least I didn't do that, right? Because there's always like a Hitler, right? There's always someone that's like, well, I'm not Hitler. Well, I hope not, right? Like, is that the standard? You know, but we can do that in our head, right? Well, I'm not. Thank God I'm not like that, man. But it wasn't that bad. I've earned this because of how hard life is, right? We say stuff like that, or I won't do it for too long, or just this one time. That justification we try to do finds its insidious root in pride. Like Adam and Eve, we choose right and wrong, and we assert our morality above God's for various reasons. Look at some of these verses, because pride has consequences. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the unplowed field of the wicked produce sin. A proud heart is like an unplowed field that just breeds weeds and bad fruit. If your pride is not exposed and dealt with continually, it will choke out the good fruit and produce the bad, and you won't even realize it's happening. You won't. Just like you don't know if you have a virus in your plants, it still starts eating away. You will not know it's in your life until the fruit starts coming out, unless you have people in your life that help you see it before it starts viciously attacking your character. Pride is a factory for sin production. We need people that can understand it, see it, and expose it in our lives. Go ahead and go to the next one. It says, before his downfall, a man's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. And then the next one is much like it. It says, there is a way that seems right to a person, to a man, but in the end it leads to death. To Eve, eating the fruit felt right, which is the scariest part about it, isn't it? Eve ate that fruit and thought, this is good. That's how manipulated she got. Like, this is a good thing. But whether something feels right, or sits well in your gut, or feels good in your heart, that is not an indicator of whether it is righteous. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Feeling good about something is not the moral compass that God gave us. He gave it to us in the scriptures. Going with your gut is not a biblical principle, and it leads to destructive tendencies and comes from pride. Let's read. So you talk about pride. Okay, is this really scary root sin? What do we do with it? How do you recognize it? There are some obvious ways to see it. Like the most obvious example is when you watch professional sports. You know, right now the NFL playoffs is going on, and someone makes a great play, and they're like, woo! You know, every time it's like, and I'm like, how? Like, and they're just pumped, and they're dancing and stuff. A lot of that, and then you hear people's like quotes on Twitter. They're like, oh, I'm the best, and you're like, are you the, like, is that what makes you the best? Like, you can feel the pride oozing out. Not of all athletes, that's not always the case, but it's maybe the most obvious example. And then, but most pride is not that way. Most pride is a lot more subtle. And I want to take the last bit of time, about 10 or so minutes, 15, and talk about the fruit of pride, and then we'll work backward. That makes sense? This is the end result. So you kind of begin there, and then you trace it all the way back. And I'm telling you, we have this in our lives. And this is not an exhaustive list. It was some of the ones that I think maybe are lesser thought of. Right? Let's go through it. The first is pride in comparison and self-exaltation. Go to Luke 18, an amazing verse on humility as a virtue and pride as a danger. And you may still be turning there, but for time's sake, I'm going to jump right in. Luke 18, we're going to start in verse 9. It says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. I just want to stop there. It's actually really rare for scriptures to tell us exactly who Jesus is talking to. Usually we have to kind of extrapolate that out, but there it is. To the self-righteous, Jesus taught this parable. Verse 10. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, thank you so much that I'm not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector here. I wonder if he could hear him. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. I'm so good. But the tax collector stood at a distance, like on the back pew. He wouldn't even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast, right? A whole different kind of breastbeating. And he said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus says, I tell you that it's this man, rather than the other, who went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts themselves will be humbled, and they who exalt himself will be exalted. He who humbles himself will be exalted. You know, we have at times, a desperate need for validation. And this leads to the compare game and self-exaltation. I'll give you an example. She's not here today, but Jocelyn Schlosser is amazing with children. She came and watched our kids last week. We were taking Noelle to the doctor. She was with them for like 3 hours. It was a way longer appointment than we thought. And we came home, and the first thing my son said, he was like, Jocelyn's more fun than you. I was like, and Jocelyn was there. I was like, ah ha ha ha. But inside I was like, oh, no one's more fun than his dad. Like, what do you mean? You know, like, I had this like moment where I was like, can't be true. Like, she's just the new kid on the block, you know. Like, and I'm like, she's amazing. I just like, literally, that was like, not anger at Jocelyn, but almost like this weird jealousy. Like, no, it's my child. Like, what's wrong with you, Kyle? Like, everyone knows that Jocelyn's not trying to steal your kid. She's great at what she does, right? She just loves them. What is that? That's pride. It's that jealousy that comes from the need, the incessant need for me to compare myself. You know, I've talked about this before, and this is not like I'm doing this cool thing. I've been going to the gym more, and when I go, I am by far one of the smallest humans in this facility. And there's really no reason for me to walk around and be like, what's up, bro? That's not obviously who I am. And yet, even there, in this place where I am so unimpressive, I still look around for people that I think I'm in better shape than sometimes. It's subtle, but I'm telling you it happens. Why do I do that? It's my insecurity, fueled by pride. It's this compare game that I play. And it's subtle, it happens in my head, but it exists. And then Jesus, so he talks about the comparison the Pharisees making. Oh, I'm so glad I'm not like him. And of course, we can feel his pride. Then Jesus zooms in on the thoughts of this Pharisee, right? Here's what's scary about this particular thing. There's the kind of pride that's like me at the gym, which is dumb. Or like me with like my jealousy. And then there's a scarier kind of pride. The pride of the Pharisee. The Pharisee found some form of spiritual peace in his pride. Do you see that? The Pharisee actually felt good about his righteousness. because of his comparison to less righteous people. And he found peace. Peace does not mean you should be at peace. When it's like that. Peace is good. We want peace. But there's a certain kind of like, oh, I'm good spiritually, that's built off of because I'm better than them. Of course, what he did, the great irony of this is that he wasn't. Right? Check out this quote, a really powerful quote from a book called Humility. Pride often clothes itself in garments of praise and penitence. Like, pride is not afraid of the church. Pride is not afraid of your place of prayer. Pride loves those spots. Because if pride can sneak its way in there, it's much more dangerous. Much more subtle. Pride, go to the next one. Another thing you see here is the tax collector's reaction to failure. Look at the tax collector. He's like, have mercy on me, I'm a failure, I'm a sinner. The tax collector had a humble self-assessment, right? He knew who he was, he understood who he was before God, and it brought humility. You know, he couldn't earn God's love, but he asked for his mercy. You see pride in your reaction to your failure. How do you react when you fail? Do you get angry? Does it linger? Do you lose sleep over it? Do you get insecure? Do you get embarrassed? Especially with public failure. Do you get embarrassed? Where does that? That comes from pride. Because people are seeing it, right? Like my reaction to failure is because, I want to be better. Failure is just a part of life. How you deal with failure is going to be one of the single most important things to your growth. And if you can't deal with failure with humility, you won't grow. You will regress. It's just how it works. My negative reaction to a perceived or real failure is almost always an indicator of pride in my life. Because I don't like accepting that someone is better than me or that I'm not as good as I thought I was. And it's driven by insecurity. Instead of just accepting who we are and trying to get better, we try to hold on to this picture of ourselves that we have, right? And convince other people that that picture is accurate. Why? That's not authentic. It's pride. Pride drives that. Pride is not just found in our reaction to praise, but in our reaction to, or rather failure, but in our reaction to praise. Proverbs says, a crucible for silver and a furnace for gold, but people are tested by the praise they receive. Perhaps a better indicator of your pride or humility than a better indicator of your pride or humility than your failure is how you react to praise. So interesting. When you are refining silver or gold, you put them through a furnace or a crucible, and you melt the bad stuff out and you keep the good stuff in. And this proverb says that your character goes through the same process when someone praises you for something you've done. That's like a crucible for your character. How do you respond to that? And I would say that sort of the most obvious comical example is the one-upper in your life. We all have a one-upper. You know what that is? It's like when someone's like, oh, you should have seen it. I made three threes in basketball. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I actually made 4. And you're like, did you have to though? Like, oh, I made this incredible pasta dish. I made a really incredible pasta dish. And you know those people? And perhaps you are one of those people. And you need friends to tell you, kind of a one-upper. But where does that, even like that example, what is that? That is pride. Like, I can't just accept the great thing you did without trying to let you know the great thing I did. And these people are hard to be around. And I have absolutely been this person. And I've been this person in my head more than I've done it out loud. It's all pride. It's pride all the same. You know, one drives people away more than others. Perhaps how you react to success is your best indicator of pride. Do you then boast about it? Is it you trying to find subtle ways for people to learn about it without you acting pride? Because we all know what sounds prideful. Like, I'm not going to walk to Cody and be like, dude, I'm awesome. Listen to this incredible thing I did. Or you'd be like, this is so weird. Like, but I could come up and try to find a way to maneuver the conversation to talk about my accomplishments. That's a very normal thing, I think, in just normal conversation. In that you find your pride. Pride thrives in isolation. Those who trust in themselves are fools. But those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. Pride does very well in darkness, not unlike a virus. When viruses are not exposed and they fester. When pride is not kept accountable, it also festers, it mutates, it grows, it infects, it expands. We need accountability in our lives. And the best way to think about this is if you live a pretty isolated life, if you feel alone, you have to think about this. We have to think, what may I be doing to contribute? And so many of us have been in this space. And it's not always this, but sometimes it is. Does that make sense? Like sometimes our isolation, we bring some of it on ourselves. It's always a two-way street, but it's important to think about. It takes a lot of humility. Go to the next one. The proud and arrogant person, mocker is his name, behaves with insolent fury. I want to just take the last couple minutes and talk about our reactivity. Go to the next one. Impulsivity and reactivity are all examples of pride. Insolent fury. That's what that is. It's reactivity. It's impulsivity. The indignation you feel when this applies to every human being. You ever heard somebody just get your blood boiling? You have almost no context for what was said. Did you hear what happened? Oh, just let me at him. Oh! Have you been there before? You have no idea what happened, but you're so angry. Super triggering for whatever reason. We've all been there, right? Maybe you see someone's humility or pride most on full display in those moments, in your reactivity, in the impulse to be angry or easily offended. Because when we react with impulsive words or emotional outbursts by saying something we shouldn't say, in whatever space that is, you probably see it on most full display on social media, but you see it in just casual interactions. You see it in the way maybe we might gossip to one another or send that text or say that thing. I've done this so many times, right? Why does that happen? Because we're saying to ourselves, I don't need to think about this. I know what's true and I know what's right. And you don't. But we act that way because in our pride we say, I gotta vent this. I just gotta say it. That is often, you don't need to vent that. Not like that. If you're gonna vent to God, that's the whole psalm.
Amen.
Just people be like, I'm so angry right now. And then I can imagine they're like, but I love you. Like to the person. But you heard the way it talks about you to God, you would not be my friend right now. Like I'm so mad at you. But we filter it through God and through spiritual people before we vent it on people. I think just venting is really arrogant.
Yes.
It's just, I just care about myself and you just got to hear it. How many times have I thought to myself, oh, I'm so mad. And then when I heard the story, I'm like so ashamed. You know, like someone's not at church for a while or something like that. And I'm like, oh, like my minister radar is up. And I'm like, they got to come to church. It's so great. And then they're like super sick. Or their parent died. Or their son's in the hospital. Or this really hard thing happened. And then you just immediately feel like, such a bum. My pride led me to that. My impulsivity. My insolent, or not insolent, but my insolent fury behavior. Are you with me there? Pride is easily offended and has a high degree of reactivity. Pride, very prideful people often become injustice collectors. And it's a concept from a book I was reading. The concept is that they see hurt everywhere, very rarely own it themselves, and just collect that hurt, even for other people. Like, I'm so angry that happened to that person. We don't know what happened there, but I'm just angry about it. Pride can lead us to becoming, there's a lot of injustice in the world, but it's not healthy to be an injustice collector until they leave it on your shelf, right? This is maybe us, if we're easily hurt or slow to heal or given to victim attitudes. Now, slow to healing, there's a lot of potential legitimate reasons for that. Having a victim attitude is so dangerous, though, to your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Pride will lead us there. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Pride makes assumptions and lacks curiosity. When you hear something, the first response cannot be, this is exactly what I think about the thing that I really don't know what's going on. The question is curiosity. What happened? Maybe I should ask them. I think humility is most often expressed in good questions. Rather than trying to determine the truth, rather than just knowing the truth, try to determine the truth with a spirit of curiosity. Genuine searching. Curiosity and humility are partners, right? One is fruit of the other. And then finally, pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Defensiveness, quarreling, all examples of pride. I think that a quarrel cannot exist if pride is absent.
Wow.
Quarreling, always pride. I suppose to a certain degree it depends how you define quarreling, but I think the general quarreling, pride is always needed. No one is immune to the virus of pride. Not one of us. The journey toward humility is fraught with peril. And it's lifelong. But take heart. Because the beginning of transformation is often, one, a desire to change, and two, an awareness of the areas you need to change. And so this lesson is just about awareness. It's not, just so you know, it's not like I'm like, you guys are so prideful, like just straighten up. But it's just, pride exists so deeply in all of us. We have to address it in our lives. We have to go after it. You got to dig in. And God is so gracious. God knows all your pride. And if you were to lay out everything we're doing wrong, it would be so overwhelming. But the Bible says that God's kindness leads to our salvation. And that he's patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to a knowledge of the truth. That's how God is. God is patient with you. So I can be encouraged by this. You are prideful. Just like put a period on it. Like it's just true of you. But where and how? Can you increase in your humility? Can you move deeper? There's a line I want to end with that says, as water naturally moves to the lowest place, so should our character. Yeah, water, gravity just moves it down. Water doesn't exist up here, it has a free path down. Our character has to be the same way. Humility is that way. Always moves down. Always moves underneath other people, honoring others. Next week, we can go to the last slide. Thank you, Emily, for your help. The last slide, and this is absolutely, if you know your history, the final solution is a really horrifying thing from history, but in God's eyes, it's a beautiful thing. Of course, the final solution was the result of that, the fruit of that was the Holocaust, right? This perfection of the human race by the Nazis. But in Jesus' eyes, in his upside-down kingdom, the final solution is an example of humility in Jesus. And that's what we're going to tackle next week, all right? Let's say a prayer. We're going to close out a couple announcements. So as I pray, I'm also going to pray for our offering. As always, feel free to give. Black boxes there or online at AnnArborChurch.com. All right? Let's pray together. Father, we do love you, and we need you so badly to help us see our pride. Pray that you'd help us to see it, Father. Help us to help one another see it, and help us to be so gracious with one another. We need your mercy. We need each other's mercy. I need the church's mercy. Even just personally in my position, God, I pray that we would be that. And it wouldn't be a false humility, but it would be real and legitimate and expressed in the way we treat one another, the way we think about one another, the way people feel when they come into this room. We love you. Help us as we always want to live in a spirit of generosity with our money, our time, our resources, and all those things. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, guys, so we're going to close out here, and I have some announcements, and then I have just like a section of just good news. Like a bunch of good newses. All involving people, which is the best kind. So first of all, I want to introduce something we're going to start doing in a couple weeks. We're going to have a new midweek series. Normally, our midweeks, are the first week we do something, and then it's small groups and hospitality. We only meet together once. But for the months of February and almost all of March, we're going to meet together every week. A lot of it will be on Zoom, but the first of each month will be in person. And of course, you'll get emails about that. You'll hear about that. You can see it online. Because at the beginning of the year, we're going to tackle how to study the Bible with our friends. We're going to really go after it because a lot of us have done it. Most of us have done this before. Maybe we've been studied with. Studying with other people, some of us have done that. But sometimes this is like outdated software. And if you have a computer that's old, mine's like 6 years old, and it's always telling me, you don't have what you need. Like you're not relevant to my software. Like, and then I never update it because I don't trust anything. You know what I mean? It's like, you need this thing. I'm like, I don't need anything. Like, all I need is Word. Like, and I'm fine. And if I don't have that, I'll just use my notepad. Like, and we can be this way with our studying. Some of us come from a tradition of studying, but culture moves really fast. And culture is moving faster than it's ever moved before. The way we present the gospel should move with it. Not the truths we express, those don't change, but how we present the gospel. It needs to always evolve. So Chris and I, for really the last couple of years, have been taking time to try to evolve the way we study with people so that we can meet people where they're at and also correct some things that I feel like I did wrong for a really long time. some of the manipulative patterns and some of the leading questions and some of the strange DNA that undergirds some of the ways some people, we try to get rid of that and use more relevant verses, ask better questions, so on and so forth. So, of course, this is for everybody. We really want to encourage you to be there if you can. It's just to become a better disciple maker. So, starts the first Wednesday in February. That'll be in person, and you're all going to get I'm trying to go big. I'm going to give you packets with nice paper. Not like the paper that rips because there's a strong wind. This is the paper that you hold and you're this matters. 60-pound gloss, expect it, right? And so it's going to be great. And the structure of each one is going to be about an hour of teaching. We're going to go over 2 studies, 15 minutes of Q&A, and then whoever wants to stay after, will stay after and ask as many questions as you want. But that's the part that I kind of would love us all to be there for. All right? This is for anybody. If you're I have a friend who doesn't know anything, I'm whatever, bring. I don't care. I'm not going to try to control who's there or not. I just love you to be there. Right? For the next one. Okay, so we're really excited about this. One of the things that we want to start doing is having a family dinner night after church once a month. We're just all here, and I know that there are different feelings about evening services, but I just appreciate, first of all, you all embracing it. But one of the great opportunities is right when you get out, it's dinner time. So we thought on weeks when off basketball, 1 week a month, bring your own dinner. And that's the next thing. We're going to bring your own dinner, we're going to try this, and we're going to play a card game together. Are there any euchre fans out there? Not quite as many as I anticipated. Then the beauty will be learning the card game together. So what we're going to do is we're just going to learn this card game. If you want to play next week, it's going to start next week. That's the next slide. We're just going to stay after, break. If you need to run out real quick and grab food and come back, you can put it in the fridge. There's 2 fridges. You can use that. I think there's a microwave in here.
Yes.
There's a microwave. Everything the body needs, a microwave and a fridge. And you're fine. Come, and we'll just do dinner. And we're just going to hang out. You don't have to play cards. If you're I'm super stressed about learning a new game, then don't learn the new game. Just be you. Bring a game. Do whatever you want. We're just going to be together. We're just going to keep building it. Cool? All right, next one up. We have exciting news. First exciting news is that there is a new baby in the church. Now, I'm not talking about ours, although I don't think I actually ever announced that this child was born. I just figured you all knew because I looked so sleep deprived. So, ours is the one that looks like it ate the other one. And this is not you know how it looks this is a perspective thing, no one else closer. No, they're side by side. They're the same distance apart, obviously. So, Emerson was born, Mike and Chelsea's little girl, 5 days ago. They're doing great. Chelsea's healthy, Emerson's healthy. Everything's good. They're doing great. I just wanted the church to know it's a beautiful thing. And, even with modern medicine, labor and birth can be really, really hard it's always hard on the mom and the baby, but it doesn't always lead to no health complications. But so far, it seems great. So everybody's praying. Thank you for that. We also had a baptism last week. Tiffany was baptized. You don't have to stand up, but can you at least put your hand in the air? Can you put it in the air? There she is. You can put it down. Obviously, but it's important. I want you to know that we have another sister. And welcome to the kingdom. We love you. We're super excited for you to be here. Tiffany is a senior at EMU. She's a hurdler on the track team. She's an amazing young woman. Super excited. That's her mom and her twin sister right next to her. And that's actually the Weatherston's old basement. If you were that creepy basement looks super familiar. That's why. It's a beautiful creepy basement. Many special things have happened. And then last thing is, I want to introduce, he does have, the top of his forehead does exist. That is Max and Sabrina Player, really dear friends of Kristen and I. They're moving here in a month to do campus ministry here. So for those of you who are I don't know what that means. What that means is that, we live in this college town. And there are so many people that we want to find God. And we've wanted for a long time to be able to have people on staff supported by the church to spend all their time and energy just with the campus ministry. Our current students to bring more in. This is super exciting for the church. You're going to be a great part of the church. It's a great sacrifice and a great thing for the Detroit church, just supporting that and letting us have that. And so we're really excited. Max is going to play here. They're going to be here in 2 weeks. They're going to live with Chris and I for a little bit, and they kind of officially start in March. So you'll start seeing them in February. So it's their first big move, It's a big time. They've been in Florida their whole lives, and they're coming here February 1st. So they're as crazy as we were. But they love Jesus. They will immediately love you. You'll love them. So just want to encourage you to really wrap your arms around them, as you always do anyway. Cool?
Wow.
I think that's all the exciting news. With that, we'll say have a great, exciting night. We love you, and we are playing basketball afterwards for anyone who just wants to get out there and get buckets. Love you.